Well, I started a couple minutes early, but I'm going to wait for everybody to get in here. I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Welcome back to the JJPB podcast. So that way you know who I am, JJ right here with you once again. And if you're first time here, make sure you subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, welcome to the family. Welcome to JJPB family. And my veteran subscribers, much love to you for all that you do, helping support the channel. Okay, now the thing is this. Before we get into what we're going to be discussing today, I want everybody to relax and just sit back and let's go through this piece by piece. I'm going to get what's on my chest off so that way you guys can understand where we're coming with this. And then I'm going to take questions from you guys in the chat to see what you think about it. And you know what we're going to be talking about today because you obviously know what I got on the, that I posted what it's going to be about. But I'm going to tell you anyway. We're going to talk about the 4070 Super, the 4070 Ti Super. We're not going to talk about the 4080 Super is because it's not out there yet. So there's nothing really to talk about there because we don't got any review or results on that. So what we're going to do is we'll start off with the 4070 Super, which I'm going to point right here. I got the 4070, and I know some of you got the 4070 as well. We're going to roll back and we're going to talk about this a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the 4070 Super. Now, there's some misconceptions out there about the 4070 right here that I keep hearing from a lot of people. They're like, well, the 4070 is only $550. Yeah, it is. But the misconception is you got you got actually three different versions, I would imagine. Well, two different versions in my book. But when it comes to the AIB partners, there's two different versions. You got your non-overclocking mode, and you got your overclocking graphic cards. So this is an overclocking one. And the reason why I got the overclocking one is because I knew in my mind that if I didn't get the overclocking card, that I was not going to get the performance out of one that's locked. This is not locked. I can overclock this. So the difference between getting one that you can't overclock and the one you can, the big difference. So I was watching a video on a reviewer. And yes, I do watch videos on other reviewers, to see where they're coming from when it comes to their testing and everything else. It's not to give me ideas. It's to see what they're coming up with, their opinions, their factual opinions on the cards they're testing. Even though that I can't get my hands on, the newest cards that are coming out like they can, but I can give my opinion on it. This card I can give a factual opinion on because the fact is I've already tested this card. I've already tested this card. I've tested these already. And I can tell you this is lying in between 1% of each other on my testing. I've already told you guys this. So machine on the 7600 XT, I haven't put out a video on that just yet because I'm still gathering information on it. And when I get all that together, then I'll put it out there that, I'll give you my analysis on it. But the thing is this, I don't have all the information together just yet, so I can't really put my finger on it to actually use it today in this live stream. So maybe I'll save that for next week on the live stream. So that way, you know, you guys, we can collaborate and find out what, you know, the do's and don'ts. I just basically, oh, don't be sorry about it. It's fine. It's fine. No worries at all. But getting down to the fact of it, it's like you and me, we both got the 4070. Okay. Now, for me to trade this card in for a last gen card, forget it. I'm not going to do it. I wouldn't even trade this for the 6950 XT. Why would I trade something that's going to give me 5 years of gameplay compared to one that's going to give me 2 to 3 years gameplay? One that's going to have a 5-year warranty on it, 3 years from Amazon, 2 years from the factory, 5 years. Why am I going to give that up compared to doing a last gen card that's only going to give me, what, 2 years factory warranty? I'm not going that route. So just to give you an idea, you know, and with the last gen cards that I've been hearing that, you know, they're not, even if they RMA the card, if there's a problem, they're still having problems with getting a replacement for it. So with the newest card, they won't have much of a problem getting a replacement for it. So this is giving me my path forward. As I'm looking at this card right here, gives me a path forward. Now, everybody says, well, you know, the 4070 and the 4070 Super, there's a 22% variance in between the two. 22%. Actually, there's not. Because there's two different versions of the 4070 that everybody missed. They missed the OC version and they got the normal version that's not OC. Now, the ones that were tested with the 4070, okay, I did see a lot of reviews on the ones that were without the overclocking version and the ones that were with. Okay, so it doesn't line up with the fact of the 22%. The 22% variance between the 4070 Super and the 4070 doesn't line up. Not with me, and looking at their testing compared to my testing, it doesn't line up. But what I did come up with was that this is what I come up with. Between the 4070 and the 4070 Super, there's a 5% difference between the two, that the 4070 Super is 5% faster in rasterization. 5%. Now, compared to this, now with the 4070 Super in ray tracing, I only seen 11% difference between the two. 11%. Power-wise, I can tell you the 4070 Super draws more power than the 4070. So based on all that down to it, and what I come down to it was that, and overall with everything compressed together, that I was only getting about 4.35% faster on the 4070 Super than the 4070. Compressed all together. So this crap of 22%, I don't know where they come up with this. This must be to where they don't compile everything like they're supposed to. So knowing that they didn't compile it correctly, I took and had friends of mine on the East Coast, and they do this all the time. They test for a living because they got their own little gig. I'm not allowed to put them out there, so, but I just say they're friends of mine. That they compiled everything together and listened to what I had to say, and it comes down right to the same thing that I'm saying. So, you know, you're not getting a great difference with between the 4070 and the 4070 Super. Just to say. Now, you're not getting that much difference between the 4070 Super and the 78. Oh, Don't forget your drink and snacks, by the way. And the 7800 XT. There's not much of a difference. Because if there's not much of a difference between the 7800 XT and the 4070, there's not going to be that much difference between the 7800 XT and the 4070 Super. So we'll just knock that all up. Okay. Now, I'm going to read the questions that you guys are typing in, and let's see where this is going to go. This is where we're talking about the 4070 Super. We'll get to the other ones a little bit further in the video, so be patient. We're just going to go one graphics card at a time and see what you all think. But in my point of view, if you get the non-OC version of the 4070 Super, the non-OC 4070 Super, then you're going to see the clocks, the GPU clocks, only going up, not even going up to 2900 megahertz. And it's going to have really low clocks. But on the OC version, if you put it on performance, there's a little switch on there. You go from Q to P. You go from like quiet mode to performance mode. You put it on performance mode, you can get your clocks up over 3 gigahertz for the GPU clock. Memory clock's a little bit different. It only is based on a different field, but you should be able to get your clocks up on your memory as well. I pushed the 4070 to its max and seeing what it can do. Okay, the 4070 Super, if it's the OC version, should give you better performance than the non-OC version. But here's the caveat. If you can get the 4070 Super OC version at MSRP, then you got a great deal. But if you can't get it at MSRP, then it's not a great deal. So try it. If you're going to shop for a 4070 Super, find the OC version and find it at MSRP. That's a deal. Just to let you know. Okay, now we're going to go off to the questions. Let's see where we get the questions. I was trying to help my wife. This is Machine. I like my 4070. I'm glad you do. 13%. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and overall, the way I look at it, I'm not seeing much of a difference. It can range from 4 to 13%. Depending on the game you play and everything else, it could go from back to forth. Okay. I got mine to 210 watts. Good deal. That's not bad. If you can get yours up to 210 watts from the 4070, you're not doing too bad. Do remember that the 4070 Super goes up to what? 260 or 270 watts, maybe a little more. But remember, the 4070 Super is carrying 2 8-pin connector plugs. And this is only carrying 1 8-pin connector plug. So you can push this all the way up to 243 watts before the plug starts to overheat. Do keep that in mind. Okay, VGA bias update. MTBK, what is with this VGA bias update? I really want to know that. I mean, when we get to that point. Okay, with the 4070 Ti Super. MTBK, we're doing the 4070 Super right now. We'll get into the 4070 Ti Super soon enough, and I'll save your comment for that. Have you seen the tech power up video for the 4070 Super in the 4070 Super? I have. I've seen it. That's their opinion. But when it comes to the 4070 Super, I've seen many opinions. I've heard from friends of mine and their testing opinions But when it comes to the testing, I trust my friends because they've been doing it for over 30 years and they're going to give me the honest results. If I can't get my hands on the equipment and they can, I'm going to give them a phone call and say, hey, what do you come up with? And they're going to tell me. They're not going to lie to me. See, there's a difference. I don't know when it comes to, other people reviewing this, but I can go by what my friends are doing because I've seen their testing. I can rely on it. And that's the reason why I'm telling you guys this, because I can rely on it. I can't rely on somebody putting their test results out there, and I can't see how they're doing their testing. At least with my friends, I know exactly what kind of testing they're doing, with what kind of equipment, and, it's very professional. So, yeah, I can go by what they say compared to all the reviews that are out there. So, it shows that the 7800 XT is the best value for the money, which is true. Yeah. You mean this one right here? Right here. You mean that one right there? Even though that went to the Christmas present for my friend. So, but anyway, I ended up getting me another one because I kind of like the fact of the RX 7800 XT. Don't get me wrong. But if I really want to do it this time, I would try for the 7900 XT if I was going to try for something like that. But looking at the price point, if I wait long enough, the 7900 XTX will be coming down in the price, and then I should go for that instead. I'm waiting. Patience. Patience is the virtue. But I can tell you right now, between the 4070, the 4070 Super, and the 4070 T, was it? I think it was the 4070, 4072 Super, and the 4070 Ti, being all on the AD104, there's not going to be much difference. Other than, one card, they add, you got your lowest card on the 4070 field where they go up to the next card. The 4070 Super, they add more power, they add a little bit more cores to it and everything else. A cut down 4070 Ti, basically. So between those three cards, you're only using one die. Between three cards, you use one die. And they're all cut down within the midst of each other, just folding like this. Okay? So, and overall, the way you look at it, Nvidia only uses 2 dies for 6 cards. Come on. 2 dies for 6 cards? And the 4090 stands alone. So let's think about that. It's only $749. Yep. But they did drop the, at one time, the 7900 XTX. They did drop it down to, what was it? Somebody said a fire sale for $709 on the 7900 XTX. I really wish I would have got into it, but I didn't have the money for it. So that's something I'll have to work on. But look at the near future. Okay, in the near future, I might look into that cart. Okay, so is there any more questions on the RTX 4070 Super? And then we can move on to the 4070 Ti Super. Any questions? From what I've seen, Machine, you're best off to wait for your Black Friday or your Cyber Mondays in the near future for sales. You never know. Always watch Amazon, always watch Newegg, because they always got some kind of sale going on. So just keep in the market of that. Machine, that card looks like it's rainbow colors. I don't think that kind of card's in my wheelhouse. You know, seriously. Okay. MTBK says, yeah, 4070 Super sales on Mind Factory. I have to look into that. Machine, yeah, you're right. I mean, for $1,000 and they're not putting any ARGB on it. I mean, truthfully, to be honest with you, with that kind of money, I'd rather them decorate it up a little bit better than making it look like, you know, if it's going to be for an adult, I would kind of, you know, put some lighting on it. But, you know, they haven't learned that fascination of, you know, giving you a blacked out version or a rainbow color version, you know, kind of, no. I mean, I'm sorry, you know, I got a blacked out version, yeah, but I paid MSRP for mine. So, let's see. Actually, MTBK, I'm going to bring this up too, since you brought it up. You said the 47 Super first day sales are $240. Yeah, but the 4070 sales were over 300 plus from what I was hearing and what I was seeing by the numbers. So it was quite a little bit higher that on the 4070 sales than it was the 4070 Super sales. So, but like I said, after 6 months' time, they dropped the price down to $550 on the 4070. So do expect the 4070 Super, the prices to drop down, just like the 4070. So be patient. This might go down to $500, and the 4070 Super might go to $550. You never know. So, where do I get the numbers at? It's all over the internet. I mean, when it comes to that, it's all over the internet. You know, for the amount that's been sold and everything else, people post them all the time in Reddit, or, you know, especially on, you know, like videocards.com or WCCF Tech, or, you know, you just gotta, they're all over the place. You just gotta, you know, gather all that information and then put it all together and see what you come up with. But that's pretty much the information I got. Yes, only this one retailer was 315 RTX 4070 Supers on day one. Latest bias users, so users have to do it themselves version. Okay, yeah, that brings up another issue to where, you know, but that's coming up next. We'll get to that. We'll come up to that in a moment. So, okay, any more questions about the 4070 Super? If not, we'll move on to the 4070 Ti Super. I'll give you guys, I know there's a 10-second delay in the stream, so I'm giving you guys the 10-second delay to see if you're going to, you know, comment on it, or you got anything else you want to add in onto it for the 4070 Super. Okay, well, alrighty then. Let's move on to the 4070 Ti Super. And this is what I found when I was doing the video for the 4070 Ti Super, doing the benchmarks. When I was doing the benchmarks, this is what I uncovered. Between the 4070 Ti and the 4070 Ti Super, between rasterization and ray tracing, between those two, there is only the 4070 Ti Super was only gaining about 3%. 3% on the benchmarks. So that means you're only getting 3% more off of the 4070 Ti Super than you were the 4070 Ti. A lot of people are disappointed, and listen to this. A lot of people are disappointed to the fact of it, because on rasterization, the 7900 XT took the lead every benchmark on rasterization. But here's the caveat. The 4070 Ti Super took the lead on ray tracing. And like I told you all before, the way it works is if you want to go AMD, you're going to get rasterization. And if you want to go Nvidia, you're going to get ray tracing. So either way you go. And these benchmarks were not dedicated onto DLSS3 or FSR3, motion fluid frame or whatever. No, just raw to raw. That means raw GPU to raw GPU, horsepower only. So now to go back to your questions, I read someone plays Sci-Fi with a 4K monitor, full HD. When he watches and caught in Providence, same time it crashes with 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Luxury problems or plan obsolescence. Yep, which is true. I mean, I can't deny that, MTBK. I cannot deny the fact of that, the 12 gigabyte of VRAM has its limitations. But on these cards, some people are turning off, and this is the biggest mistake I see people making. They turn off the share system that if you run out of 12 gigabytes of VRAM, that it automatically pulls from your system RAM. You can turn that off and turn it on to where you can share that extra little bit of RAM with your GPU, from system to the GPU, to assist so it doesn't crash. But people have been turning that off, and they've been saying, oh, this is crashing and this and that. So do keep that in mind. I noticed that on my system to where I can turn it on and off. And you can do that in the control panel, NVIDIA control panel. So that'll be for another discussion, but we'll go there. So we're going to move on down the road. Let's see. Okay, MTBK brought up the point of, and this is the reason why I was kind of waiting until we got to the 4070 Ti Super. It seems that MSI had a problem with the 4070 Ti Super. The problem is the BIOS version that was in the cart was incorrect, and it was causing a 5% drop in FPS. So what they did was, after four updates, from what I hear, they finally got it right. So that was like, oh my God. So we're moving on. We're moving on. Okay, let's see. That was for Machine. I'm good. I'm great. Question is if people can do the math and give it best recommendations. Well, you know what? It's not hard to do the math. It's not hard to find price to performance. But the way I always do price to performance, and I know it's not short term like everybody wants to see. I do mine in the long term. I do mine in a 5-year long term. So basically, I see how much the card's going to cost per year times 5 years for the total price of the card. So you take the total price of the card, divide it by 5 years, and that comes up with how much the card's going to cost you per year to have it for every year. Now, if you want to know how much it's going to cost you per day, then you take 5 years, divide it by how much in a year? Well, no. You take the total price of the card, divide that by 5 years, and then take that first year and divide that by 365 days. My bad. And then you know how much every day that card's costing you. And you'll see the performance. If you match the performance to that, then you actually see your true performance. Okay. Now, I think the Machine says, I think the 4070 Ti Super will mature over time with an extra 4 gigabytes of VRAM. Yeah, it will. It will mature for the fact that it's got 4 extra gigabytes of VRAM, but still, 16 gigabytes of VRAM is not going to make much more difference than 12 gigabytes of VRAM, even though if people say because, oh, the game crashes and this and that, I'm sorry to say this, it's because they don't know how to balance out their display settings on the game in order for it not to crash. You want to play the game smoothly, then you test until you get it to where it runs smoothly. And then you can make a decision on if you like that card or not. Okay? But when you go to push it in balls to the wall, come on. You really think the card's going to really do you much justice by you pushing it short-term balls to the wall? No. You got to look at you playing it long-term. The testing that's going on that you get from different reviewers is short-term testing. And there's a difference between short-term and long-term testing. Long-term testing is where somebody like me has been using the card for 6 months, at least, and come up with the overall testing from the first day and 6 months after. Okay? That will give you an idea of the card being viable for the next 4 years or 4.5 years compared to getting something that's short term. So let's kind of, think about it really quick. I'm not seeing what you are reading. Oh, that explains that. Okay. That can be good for MSI. That can't be good for. Well, Machine, you're right. That cannot be good for MSI. All companies have their faults. Okay. With brand new hardware, you can't expect it to be perfect on day one. I understand that and I respect that. It's just like with Asus having the same problem with their motherboards. You can't expect it to be perfect on the first time. You cannot. You got to break a couple eggs to get, perfection. As simple as that. So, people have to learn that factor when it comes to PC hardware. It's not going to be perfect on the first day. After 6 months' time, if it's not perfected by then you can say something. But if it's on the first day, then I understand. Even though I said a couple things, it's not looking good for MSI. But, in the long term, 6 months down the road, they could have it perfected and there's no problem. So we'll move on from that. 4070 Ti Super confuses me a lot. Well, it does everybody else, because I can't understand why they went from the TI to the TI Super. Truthfully, some sample power limit have worse 1% lows. Some reviews show that it is less or more efficient than the 4070 Ti. Miles may vary a lot. MTBK, you are right. Because there's not much of a difference between the 4070 Ti and the 4070 Ti Super. After me looking at all the testing and getting all the things that I heard from my friends on the phone as well, and looking at everything, viable between the two, actually the 4070 Ti is looking more viable, because in some test results on some games, it shows that the 4070 Ti overtaking the 4070 Ti Super. So, yeah, I mean, 4070 Ti seems more viable, but they kind of discontinued that. So, that viability is kind of out the window now. But if you own one and you own the 4070 Ti, then, best to stick with it, because, your gameplay will be a lot easier for you than to go to the Super version. Unless you want to go from, and the only reason the 4070 Ti Super became a little bit viable was it went from 12 gigabytes of VRAM to 16. That's it. I mean, to me, if I'm playing my games and I'm only using 8 gigabytes of VRAM, me having 12 gigabytes of VRAM, to go to 16 really doesn't matter. Doesn't matter for that extra 4 gigabytes. If my games are only playing me at 8 gigabytes of VRAM, or if you're playing at 6 gigabytes of VRAM, it makes no sense, because you're only using 1/2 of the RAM. Come on, think about it. True. I would not buy that card after all that. Machine, I don't blame you whatsoever with that. I would not want to spend $800 and hope. Yeah, I agree with that. Like I told you, this Super Series so far, the 4070 Super and the 4070 Ti Super, I really don't see it going forward. Now, I wanted to see what the 4080 Super was about. That might be a path going forward. But at $1,000, if the 7900 XTX gets better performance than the 4080 Super, then I see the 7900 XTX being going forward, if you see what I mean. But if the 4080 Super is more powerful than the 7900 XTX going forward, then yeah, I see the 4080 Super with a path going forward. So that all depends on when the 4080 Super gets tested and comes out. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Okay. I dislike the AD103 chip, but I would buy if as soon as a reason pops up. Yeah, I wouldn't blame you. It doesn't look like that now. The name RTX 47. Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous. I agree with you, MTBK. The name is just so ridiculous. If that's what you're meaning, the 4070 Ti Super, that's kind of, that kind of that defeats the purpose of your past generations having just, the Ti on one and the Super on the other, just to make a card to make a sale, to take and combine the both, and then for performance wise only getting like 3% more than the original Ti, the 4070 Ti. It just doesn't make sense. It's not a viable path. Machine says that's why you wait and don't buy right away. I'm learning. You're right. You don't. I won't buy right away. I took and waited a couple weeks before I decided to buy to make my decision if I wanted to go with, and this was before the 7800 XT came out. Okay. I looked at my path of going last generation or this generation. If I was going to go to the 4070 Super or the 4060 Ti, 8 gigabytes, or I would, and that's the path I had was the 4060 Ti 8 gigabytes or the 4070 12 gigabytes. So I went with the 4070 12 gigabytes because between the 4060 Ti, either 8 or 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and the 4070, there's 23% gap in between the two. So that's the reason why I went with the 4070. I got you. MTBK says RTX 4070 Ultra. Don't you think they'll be stealing that from Intel if they did that? If they put the Ultra on that? I think they would. The 4080 Super will be close. And this is Machine saying this. The 4080 Super will be close to the 4080 in performance, I think. You could be right on that. You could be right on that. The price is what's selling. The selling point is. Yep. The 4080 Super versus the R8 is very interesting. Yeah, the difference between the 4080 and the 7900 XTX is that they trade blows. See, that's kind of the thing. If you go back through the past testing between the 7900 XTX and the 4080, they were trading blows with each other. So now you get the 4080 Super. I don't know. It's kind of maybe after all the testing, the 4080 Super might be the choice of go-to compared to the 7900 XTX. Might be. The machine says the 4070 Super Ultra Ti is next. Yeah, probably. I would agree with that. Maybe Nvidia, and MTBK says this, maybe Nvidia gives Intel a favor and refuses to do their own old naming schemes for their graphics cards because Nvidia used to have the Ultra stuff. Yeah, they did. I agree with you. They did have some of the Ultra stuff in there. But that was a long time ago, though. That was a long time ago. But it seems that Intel's got it into their name scheme, and it kind of makes it difficult for Nvidia to do that. Especially if, they can end up mistaking a graphics card for a CPU. They'll probably think it's an iGPU and it's an Intel card. It's crazy how everything is so close together. But this market is so flooded with, hardware. It's insane. If you actually look at it right now, you go to Amazon, you go to Newegg, you go to eBay, or you go to Micro Center, you go to Jawa, the market is flooded with parts. I mean, flooded. And these prices being so high, it's sick. It's insane. Why are the prices so high with the market so flooded? It shouldn't be. It should be lower, and people are buying less, so that means the supply and demand should be lower, but it seems to be going up and up and up. So it doesn't make sense to me. Remember, high numbers make bigger numbers better. Yeah, that's what they usually say, but I don't know about that, though. Truthfully, I don't. People are buying. You know, and I brought this point up to you guys. What in Discord? What if they turn around and jump back down to, and this is Nvidia, what if they jump back down to the 20 series and do a whole refresh on the 20 and 30 series and put everything up to DLSS 3, AV1 encoding, and give it the whole 900 yards that they're doing the 40 series? Would you buy a card from the 20 series refresh compared to a 40 series? If the 20 series was less in price, would you buy a 20 series card compared to a 40 series? Keep that in mind. You can leave your comments about that. That is a question. I come along with all the possible names and would love an ultra computer with Intel and Nvidia components in it. Good old times holding hands. MTBK, I agree. Gamers Next says, bigger numbers better. Yeah. Okay. That's what he says, but sometimes it doesn't work out like that, especially when, you know, these companies build a piece of hardware, they send it off to be manufactured, and sometimes the manufacturer makes a big mistake on some of the parts and then kind of screws things up, like the bias and everything else, like what happened with MSI, and then turn around, Nvidia put out the cards to reviewers from MSI without checking the cards themselves. Good old days. Machine says Super Ultra 14900 KS. Yeah, I could agree with that. That would be something. Now, I'm not saying anything about Intel, but they did change their name SKU. So coming the new generation, they're going to have a whole new name SKU. So better get used to it. And they're going to have a whole new motherboard and everything else. It looks like their generation is going to be changing. So more words and bigger numbers. Gotcha. But do you guys have any questions on the 4070 Ti Super? Because I can tell you the 7900 XT with the ray trace, I said this before, I'm going to say it again. 7900 XT trades blows in rasterization with the 4070 Ti Super. And as far as ray tracing, that they didn't use the 7900 XTX to see if it traded blows with the 4070 Ti Super. That would have been nice to see. Not unless you guys find me something out there that says they did, but I really didn't see them going that extreme to see where the 7900 XTX fits the bill. I would have liked to seen that, but I guess I missed that point. But I am going to ask that question to my friends. How come you didn't take the 7900 XTX and put it against the 4070 Ti Super to see if it trades blows to blows? But they're going to say, well, you know, there's a $100 price difference. What? $100 price difference? Well, less than $100 price difference between the 7900 XTX and the 4070 Ti Super. Less than $100 difference. Come on, guys. Really think about this. I think the 7900 XTX will drop to $899 to pick up sales when the 40 Super comes out. You know, it might go down to $849, but what I was hoping for, if AMD wants to take the bill, okay, if AMD wants to take the market, they drop that card down to $799, and put it in the same bracket with the 4070 Ti Super. But as far as performance, the 7900 XTX will take out the 4070 Ti Super And if it's good enough, it should take out the 4080 Super. So two kills with one stone, if that's the case. So Machine says, so what can the 4070 Ti Super do better than the 7900 XT besides ray tracing? Actually, that's Machine. That's actually your two basics that you got that you work with is rasterization and ray tracing. Now with AMD adding fluid motion frame to the fact of that to the driver section. Now get this. The fluid motion frames were added to the driver section for your GPU. The advantage you got with AMD is that they put the fluid motion frame to where you can enable it on your own system with your own games. So if a game doesn't give you the option of fluid motion frame, AMD gave you that option. You can turn it on or turn it off. The advantage, AMD's got the advantage on that part. So yeah, you can see an advantage point. Because DLSS 3 does not give you that advantage point. The only advantage point it gives you if you want to go to MA, or is it MXAA or TA or something like that in the control panel. It gives you a little bit of advantage, but it's only going to give you like a 1% difference. So really going from the control panel and what's on games, it really is not going to matter. MTBK says at €8.99, XTX got spotted already. While the pricing performance is decent already, someone wrote today. Cool. I don't know about the 6000 series so much doing fluid motion frame Machine. And MTBK, the prices are going to go down on the 7900 XTX sooner or later. So that's what I'm waiting to see is going to happen. The sea is starting to open up for AMD side. It's not looking so good for Nvidia right now. Even though that they said the floodgates open for the Super Series and it's going to overtake AMD, I'm starting to see the opposite way. And that's kind of bad. You know. Atlas has fallen. The 4070 Ti Super rasters faster there compared to the 7900 XT. Actually, no, I've seen test results to where the 7900 XT overtakes in most of the games, overtakes the 4070 Ti Super within a matter of between 3 and 7%. Just to give you that. Because in overall, let me see it in an overall, it does overtake it. What price would I pay for the Machine says, ask me, what price would I pay for the 7900 XTX? $799. To be honest with you, bottom line, $799. Depending on if it's the OC version or not. If it's the regular version, $799. And if it's the OC version, maybe $849. But that's basically my bottom draw right there. So Counter-Strike 2 and Jagged Alliance 3 even faster than the XTX. Like I said, MTBK, understand this. In some games, some GPUs are going to be faster than the others, but you do an overall picture within the matter of, if you test 15 different games and then you take it all in one big package and give an average to all these games in one big package, then you'll see the final draw. But from what I've seen and me doing the review on the 4070 Ti Super, that other reviewers that did the testing have said that it seems that it's the 7900 XT in rasterization taking over the 4070 Ti Super. 1080p and 1440p, I can tell you, like the 4070 Super and the 4070 Ti Super, they run okay at 1440p and 1080p, but when it comes to 4K, playing at about 30 to 57 FPS on 4K, that sucks. So that's my opinion. Yeah, I agree, Machine and MTBK, that Ratchet and Clank is rough on your GPU, depending on your settings. You know, everybody always looks for the ultimate settings, and, you know, you want to get the ultimate picture of it all. If you want the best looking picture out of all, then get yourself the best looking monitor. Start there. I'm going to be honest with you, that's what it comes down to it. If you want the overall best picture you can get the right monitor for the job. If you don't got the right monitor, don't expect your graphics card to make up for your monitor's loss. And I can tell you that for a fact because I run 1080p at 60 hertz. I run the crappiest monitors you can think, but my gameplay, I think, is perfect. I love the graphics and everything else I get from my 4070 to my monitors. I think it's awesome. And I bet you what, I bet you if I did go up to like a 250 to 500 hertz monitor at 1080p, I'd probably get blown away at 1080p. Imagine if I go to 1440p at those kind of frequencies. Yeah, I'll be totally blasted. You know, I mean, but think about it. Your monitor gives you your visual. Your graphics card is your texture manipulation. It sends it forward. It takes data and converts it into a visual and sends it forward to your monitor. So think about that first. Always think about your monitor, how you're going to build your system. Think about your monitor first before you decide to build your PC. MTBK says, if I don't have the money for a new system, I overcompensate with a bigger monitor. Hey, you know, I agree with you. There are some people, and do listen to me very carefully. There are some people that take and run a 1440p monitor, a really good one, with 240 hertz. And you know what they're using? An RX 580 with 8 gigabytes of VRAM to play their games, and they're happy with it. $100 video card with a $400 to $500 monitor. Come on. What are they doing right? That's what you need to ask. What are they doing right? MTBK says, did that twice, and people were like looking into your soul. Very immersive, very enjoyable. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. 4K is not everything. Okay? 4K is not everything. When you're running a graphics card, you're just beating the hell out of the graphics card. Now at 1440p with the 240 hertz monitor, all set up and decked out and ready to go. To me, that's as far as I would go. That would be your ultimate go-to. And I did video on PC Merch Nightmare this week on the monitors. I did see some really good monitors for at least below $200. Make sure y'all go check that video out, because I found a lot of monitors below $200 that would run perfect for gaming. Be perfect for gaming. So keep that in mind. You know, when you go to look for your monitor, you can go to Amazon. You can go to Newegg. eBay. I am still hell-bent against the eBay thing. I would not even, I wouldn't recommend going to eBay to get your monitor. I'd rather you go get your monitor brand new with a warranty compared to getting it from eBay and getting a 30-day kickback. It's not about the VRAM. True, it's not about the VRAM. Their machine. It's not all about the VRAM. If you look at it in the long run, if you're playing your games, see, people play their games differently. They'll play games that go above the amount of VRAM that they have, but most of your people play the games that are below your VRAM that doesn't affect your VRAM, so they don't have a problem. The problem is you got the 1%ers that go and try to push a card beyond its VRAM capability, and they crash it. And then they blame it on the company because it's crashing. I've seen this many a time. So, it's a game. The 1%ers play the game. But, your 99% that are out there just want the game, and they don't want to have that problem. But they play games that are well below the amount of VRAM that they use. Let's say, just for say as a thing, I run OpenGL on Second Life. I'm going to bring this up. OpenGL on Second Life. The max amount of RAM that it uses off of my graphics card is 4 gigs of VRAM. The max I have ever used is 4 gigabytes of VRAM. Okay. Now, that game is completely about textures. So with me having the 4070, I'll tell you what, I love the textures on that game. For the amount of years that I've been on that game and seeing these kind of textures that I get from this here, I'm happy. Way happy. I'm tickled. Okay, so MTBK says the most important thing is not to limit financial capabilities. If, for example, people pay their own energy bill, everybody does, a big screen that also sips power is most important. That's if it's an energy-saving monitor. Or if it's a TV that's energy-saving, which I know some people, what they do is they'll take and buy one of those smart TVs, and they'll game with it. You can get a smart TV that's really good. You could use it for gaming as well as, using it for your everyday TV kind of view. So that's what I got here on mine. My main screen. Right here. Right here. You can see it right here. It's a smart TV. It's a gaming monitor and a TV all in one. So I'm happy. Machine says go from ultra to high or medium settings. Starfield only uses 6 gigabytes of VRAM. Yeah, on some, depending on if you're running 1080p, 1440p, or you're running 4K. The more you go up, the more RAM it's going to use. The further you go down, the less amount of RAM it's going to use. So keep that in mind. Okay. MTBK says, console player do not need optimization guides for every game, but PC Master Race has the better customization mode and overall experience. I don't know. I can't comment on that, MTBK, because I've never, I mean, the only console I have ever played in my lifetime when I was a kid was the Nintendo. You know, the one with that big slidey thing that you just jam in and, you know, you play Super Mario Brothers and all that. That was the only console game I played. I played that for like maybe 6 months. But after that, I was into PCs. So I can't really elaborate on console games compared to PC. I heard that at 1080p, a 27-inch screen is not optimal, but I don't know. Okay, well, I hate to tell you, 32. Watch my finger. 27. 27. And you've guys seen my monitors. I got a 32 on bottom, 27 on top. The one that's on top is nothing but a monitor, not a TV. It's a monitor. It's a curved monitor, but I only paid $100 for it. I don't seem to have that problem. So, the only way, and also too, Machine, the only way it's not optimal is if you're running off of 60 hertz. Now, if you're running off of 180 to 250 hertz, that's a different story. It's more optimal. But yeah, at 60 hertz, it's not optimal, if that's what you heard. Nintendo Entertainment System. Back then, it was the shiz. That was before they really had great computers out. I got a 1080p 27-inch screen. It looks a little grainy. 82 PPI. But I got used to it quickly. The images were way better, to me at least. MTVK, they are to me. So I'm not nitpicking my monitors. If I can see my games, and my games play great, I'm not nitpicking. I'm not sitting there nitpicking my monitor. You know, it's so grainy. You can play the game. Does it really matter? Are you that to where you're lagging, to where you're stuttering, to where, no. If the game was stuttering on my monitor, I'd have a problem with that. But if it's not, and it's just as clear as when I'm looking at, a person in real life, I'm not going to complain about it. I'm happy with it. But this grainy thing, no, what makes it more grainy is when you go up and the pixels start getting smaller. With having the pixels a little bit larger, some people, it might look grainy, but to other people, it might not. So when you're the kind of person that's used to a CRT monitor, if you know what a CRT monitor is, then you would know that 1080p is sweet compared to a CRT monitor, which is at 640 and 480. So, 480p, compared to a 1080p, big difference. Machine says, I have a 24 and a 27. My 27 is 1440p. My 24 is a 1080p. 165 hertz each. Killer. So while we are the 1080p gang, yeah, MTBK, there you go. 1080p gang, yeah. 1080p team. We also less likely to upgrade first. I told some friends already I will stick and never go with higher than full HD. I agree with you. Hey, neither am I. I mean, only time I would go up is, let's say a company wanted me to test a monitor and said, hey, dude, you know, you want to test one of our monitors? We'll send you one. Then yeah, I'll test it. You know. But I guarantee that monitor will probably end up sitting on the shelf compared to my one that I got here. I mean, you know, it's not that it's better or worse. It's just, you know, when you get used to what you're doing on one monitor and you go to another, you know, it's kind of different ball game. It's like when you get into a car and you drive a car for 15 years, the same car for 15 years, and then turn around, that car breaks down, and then you got to get a new car. But guess what? All the buttons and different functions are in a different place, and guess what? You feel like you're a first-time driver. Just like with the monitor. You feel like, you know, you had the monitor for so many years that when it breaks down and you get a new monitor, you feel like a kid in a candy store. Right? So, but machine, if you're not getting, and I'm just going to bring this up really quick, machine, if you're not getting 1080p at 165 hertz optimal, you know, settings at 165 hertz, then somewhere along the line, either in your Nvidia control panel or on your display settings, something's not set correctly for your 1080p. If you're running two monitors at the same time, do remember this. Your video card is splitting the signal to two different directions. Two different directions. So it's going to take away from the video card, other than having one monitor on it. It's, you know, it gives you more power to your monitor, so it gives you a better scale than it would running two. So if you're running two monitors, it's going to take away some from that scale. So do keep that in mind. You know, a lot of people, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people forget this. When they got three monitors hooked up, they can't wonder why they're not getting the optimal from their main monitor, is because you got three monitors connected. So you're running that signal three different ways. Or if you got, you know, two different monitors and you're running two different signals, yeah, it's going to make your computer run a little bit slower, for the simple fact your GPU has to take in control, one at 1440p and one at 1080p. Think about it. So if you're running two monitors at 1080p, the same settings, then your graphics card's not going to work as hard trying to split the signal. But one 1080p and one at 1440p is trying to split the signal between the two. That's going to tax you a little bit on your performance when it comes to for your GPU. Just keep that in mind. I had that brought to me about a week ago. A friend of mine brought that to me a week ago, and we talked about it for like 6 hours, because he had a problem to where he wasn't getting, you know, the FPS he wanted out of his main monitor. And I said, okay, well, what are you doing wrong? He says, I'm not doing anything wrong. I said, well, if you're not getting your full performance, there's something you're doing wrong. So I asked him how many monitors. He said, I got two monitors. Okay. Now, your main monitor, what's it set at? He said, well, it's set at 4K. What did he say? 120 hertz at 4K. And then I asked him what his other monitor was set at. He said 1080p set at 100 hertz. I'm like, are you just going to shoot yourself in the foot? And I told him that. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. You got one monitor at 1080p, and you got another monitor at 4K. You're asking the signal to split between the two and the monitor to jam the signal between the two, like this. And then you're expecting it to keep up on a 4K monitor, but, you're splitting the signal and you're imbalancing the system by running 1080p on one side and running 4K on the other. Run them both at the same frequency, then your performance will come up. It's common sense. That's what I told him. And he did. He says, wow, there's a big difference. I said, yeah, hello. 1440p is taxing on your GPU, but upscaling works better on a 1440p, right? Well, I've tried the upscaling with the Nvidia control panel. You can still run at 1080p, but that doesn't mean it changes the aspect of 1080p. That just still means the same signal is going to a 1080p monitor, but you change the upscaling to a 1440p, okay? But it still doesn't change the fact of the scaling. It's still going to be 1080p. Even if you're running one monitor at 1440p nominal, and then you're running another monitor at 1080p, upscaled it to 1440p, it's still not going to run the same. You're just tricking one monitor to think it's running 1440p compared to the other monitor. But the signal going in from one to the other is going to be more taxing on you because now you opened up a new program to upscale one monitor. So it's going to take more time, and then it's going to, put more latency onto that monitor that you're upscaling. So something to think about too. 1080p at 100 hertz, bro. Yeah. Believe it or not, if you go on to Amazon, they got 1080p monitors at 100 hertz. MTBK. I have one that's at 60. I have one that's at 59.9 for some reason. So, yeah. Actually, the MTBK, you're telling them that, but actually, no, it's been tested by, quite a few people that I know that they've done it and I've done it, and I've tried it and I found it to be more taxing when it comes to the 4070, more taxing on the 4070 than to run it on native. So just to let you know that. But you're using, and understand this, you're not using the gaming display, going from you're using the actual physical program for the GPU to upscale your monitor to that next level. But when you play your games, it's not really going to matter because now you're going in between a bottleneck between taking that game and trying to upscale it to your monitor. And you already upscaled it. I mean, it's very taxing on it. Trust me. I tried Forspoken at 1080p with DLSS Ultra Performance, which is internal 360p, but it looked like way better than 360p. Okay, well, I don't know why you would run. Well, I can see why you would run it that way because you're on a laptop. Okay. If you're on a desktop, is way different than a laptop. Okay. Take a 1080p monitor, plug it into your laptop, and do your test that way and see what you come up with compared to running it running it just on the screen of a laptop, which you can break it down to the 360 to get more FPS. That's if you want to get more performance. And yeah, breaking it down to 360p, it's going to be a lot more grainy than 1080p. So, something to think about. I wouldn't upscale on it. The only thing that I would do is increase the hertz to its max. I wouldn't upscale it at all on it. And then use the display settings for the games to adjust whatever textures you want going to your monitor. I wouldn't adjust the fact of upscaling anything to my monitors, which I went through this and I didn't like the way it looked. It looked really bad to me. My 1080p is 27-inch, 75 hertz. And if I used a second monitor, I would set it at 1080p at 60 hertz for videos. Well, to each is their own. You can set it to whatever you want. Like I told you, I don't see it taxing because I'm running two 1080p monitors at 60 hertz. One's actually a smart TV and the other one's an actual monitor. So I don't see it taxing on my speed of FPS or anything else, is because they're both running at the same frequency. When you go to change the frequency on one thing, you can't expect the other one to keep up, because now you're splitting two different frequencies going two different ways. But if you're taking one frequency set for both going two different ways, then your GPU works less as hard going through one frequency than to split it off into two different frequencies. So, I know about frequencies because I was in the communication operations. I know about split frequencies. Okay. This is nothing new to me. And I even know this for a fact. So, yeah, second monitor. Yeah, it was a second monitor, but with a RTX 3050 mobile with 4 gigabytes of VRAM and 2048 shaders. Yeah, I know that. Made it run like 30 to 50 FPS. Okay, well, a 3050 on a laptop monitor, or a 3050 on a laptop, is only 1/2 of the horsepower of a desktop. You have to keep that in mind. I know you're going to argue with me about that, but it is. It is what it is. When you got something that runs at 40 watts compared to something running at 120 watts, desktop is more powerful than a laptop. So when it comes to graphics, and you're only getting 30 to 50, well, you know what? You can get 60 to 80 on a desktop. So, big difference. To me, the number of games I can use a bigger resolution than my 1080p screen is limited. Well, it works for Final Fantasy Remake, and 4K low looks beautifully, but 50 FPS only. Well, yeah, you can't expect 4K to do much more than, I've seen people push 4K up to like maybe a couple hundred FPS. But, yeah, Did it do anything for the game quality? No. From what they said, pushing it up that high, it actually made the game stutter more and made it look worse. So they said keeping it around 60 FPS on a 4K monitor seems suitable compared to pushing it up to 200 FPS. So I kind of agree with that. I have seen many reviewers only keeping it in between 50 and 60 FPS. Machine says, is a higher resolution harder on your CPU as well? Sort of, yes. Because you still need your CPU to translate and divide everything up through your motherboard, and everything's still got to process through your motherboard, your system RAM, and everything else. Yeah, it does fall short a little bit with your CPU. But if you got a strong CPU that can handle it, then basically like you do, you got AM5, you got an AM5 motherboard and CPU, so it's not as taxing to you. But for me running AM4, it would be a little more taxing, but that's only by maybe 5%. So it's not really that bad. Sorry if these are stupid questions. No, dude, let me explain this. Nothing is a stupid question here. Nothing is a stupid question. Everything has a meaning to it. And to understand that meaning, they got to know where you're coming from. I understand your meaning and where you're coming from. Trust me. No, there's no such thing as a stupid question. If there is a GPU limit, I could already tell you the first thing, MTBK, the first mistake that Nvidia and AMD are making is they're putting a wattage limit, not a voltage, a wattage limit, a wattage limiter, okay, on these GPUs. So that way you would think that you're limited to a certain amount of, you can't push it no further. But what they didn't tell you is you can take and remove that limiter and push that GPU to a certain point. So basically, if I take the limiter off my 4070, it will push just as high as the 4070 Super. Think about it. A higher resolution, would the processor work even less because less frames per second, meaning less draw calls? Okay. Actually, no. The higher you go in resolution, that means the smaller the pixelation. That means the more it has to work to compress that pixelization. So keeping that at 1080p, it doesn't have to compress as much resolution compared to a 4K where it's got to compress every pixels. For every one pixel, there's going to be 4. Compared to a 1440p where there's every 1 pixel, there's going to be 2. So, and then you go to your 1080p, which is your baseline, is 1 pixel to 1. So compressing 1 pixel into 4, that's kind of more taxing on your GPU than on 4K. That's the reason why the resolution, that's the reason why your FPS drops compared to if you play a game at 1080p and you get like 200 FPS, right? And then you go and turn around and play the same game at the same spot on 4K, and you notice that you get 50 FPS on 4K. You ask yourself, why do I get 1080p? I get higher FPS than the other. Is because one, you're doing more pixel compressing than the other one. So if that's the answer you're looking for. Machine says, I have a 60 hertz monitor in the closet. So if I use my 165 1080p monitor as a main, which would be a good idea, and my 60 as my second, will get better performance. Good question. Good question. You probably could, because if they're both 1080p, then that means there's less that the graphics card has to work towards that fashion. So it comes down to the fact. It's how you put your computer together. It's what motherboard you use, what processor you use, what RAM you're using, and everything else. The pieces that you're putting together to make it work in your favor. That makes it work better or makes it work worse. Whatever graphics card you use to make it better or make it look worse. Okay. Some people say, well, you know what? I'm running a RTX 4090 and I'm running at 1080p at 250 hertz. And my pictures look great. Some people in Reddit say to this, are you crazy? Why are you running 1080p with that kind of graphics card? Unanswered question. What's going to be the difference between running a 165 hertz 1080p monitor compared to a 1440p monitor running at 60 hertz? It's cause and effect. I mean, it's how you want to run it. Yeah, sure, Jay. But benchmark, they show side by side. Processor power consumption decreases the higher the resolution goes if there is a GPU limit already. Well, that's their testing. That's not my testing. Okay. They can run their testing the way they want to run it if they show you the actual testing. But from what I've seen running both of my monitors here, you know, and doing upscaling and then bringing it back down, I noticed a little bit of difference upscaling my top monitor here to 1440p compared to the bottom monitor at 1080p. It's kind of, it taxed it a little bit. So, yeah, everybody's got their own way of testing, man. You know, I mean, I'll tell you what, when I get a 1440p 4K monitor in here, I'll show you that testing compared to their testing. So that way I can prove the fact of what I'm saying. Right now, it's just my opinion. And from what I'm hearing from other people, it's not my fact. It's not the fact that I tested it. And I'm admitting that to you and telling you it's not a fact. It's my opinion that I hear from everybody else. You know, if I test it myself, then it becomes a fact. If I hear it from everybody else, that's just my opinion. Okay. You can test it however you want. If you want to test it yourself, if it works for you, if it doesn't work for you, that's up to you. All I'm here is to tell you what my findings are. You know, if I test it in building a PC and I use it for a build, or I get a new monitor, let's say 4K monitor, and I bring it to you and tell everybody on YouTube, hey, this is what I found out, and you can watch my testing. I told you I don't hide anything. I have nothing to hide. So I just tell you my facts of what I hear, and I bring it to you as an opinion. But if I test it out myself, then yeah, I'll bring it to you and show you the testing and show you the facts. Okay? I'm just giving you my opinion on what I hear around the whole community. And my friends, you know, I hear it from them too. So I just give my opinion on it, and I tell you what my 2 cents are on it. That's pretty much the way it works. If I test it, I'm going to bring it factual. Just to say, you know, anything I test, like this right here, these right here, I've tested. I got proof of the test, so I go by that. So, if that's what you're wondering. Sure, the processor has to work harder per frame, but overall a little less. Well, and like I said, everybody builds their MTBK. Understand this. Everybody builds their system the way they want it. If they got a powerhouse of a system, yeah, it's going to look that way. But if they don't, for somebody that has one that's low performance, it doesn't look that way. It's kind of the opposite way. So you got to look at between low performance and high performance. Okay, on low performance, a low performance PC compared to a high performance PC, there's two different fields. You got to test it that way. You got to test the low side and the high side. And maybe in between before you make an overall decision. So you got to test the low. And I'm just going to put this in here, the medium and the high side. Your PC, if you got a low profile PC to where it's running on, let's say a RX 580, you got a medium PC that's running on, let's say, the 4070, and you got your high-end PC that's running on a 4090. You can't expect the same results from all three from one monitor because it's going to change between all three. One's going to be more taxing than the other one. You're running a 4090, it's going to look like you said. But running a RX 580, no, it's not. It's going to be the opposite. So you got to look at all the field. I will keep that in mind. Maybe there is a difference between native resolution and upscaling the screen resolution. Interesting, even though I think the overall effect is low enough to ignore this. True. It is when you're running a 4090 or you're running a 4080 Super or 4080 or a 4070 Ti or a 4070 Ti Super. But when you get down to, let's say, the 4070 Super and the 4070, it starts weaning backwards, as you go downwards. So, but let's say you're running a 20 series, like a 2080 Super. You're running a 2080 Super on a AAA game on a monitor, on two monitors, and you split the signal two different ways. You're going to see more. You're going to see more problems than resolutions. I have a CPU question. Okay, go ahead, machine. What's your question? CU? Compute units, I think. If I remember right, if my brain's working correctly, it's compute units. Machine says only the Ryzen G CPUs have that, I think. Yeah. Well, no, they don't. I bet you MTBK is going to give you the answer to that one. I'm waiting to see that one. Go ahead, man. Give him that answer. What's the difference between integrated graphics CU and discrete graphics CU? That's what he's asking. Oh, I know. That's integrated graphics CU. See, there's your answer. In basic terms, overall, it's cores. If you're trying to balance it between Nvidia and you're trying to balance it in between AMD or Intel, it's all coming down to one basic principle: cores. The amount of cores that you're getting on either your processor for your GPU or you're getting for your iGPU, it's still the same factor. Well, I can tell you 12 CUs. 12 CUs is not too bad. Because the 5700G has 8 CUs, the 5600G has 7 CUs. And I've tested the 5600G at 7 CUs. And as far as my gameplay when it comes to Second Life and everything else, I don't have a problem. I mean, I have great FPS. I got the FPS up to, on my integrated graphics, up to about 346 FPS. So I didn't get that bad of FPS. But that's, if you're the kind of person that's on integrated graphics, this new graphic card series, new integrated graphics series is going to be a mind blower to you. It's going to blow your mind. Yeah, because the 5600G is like 400 and something shaders, 460 or somewhere in there. I can't remember, but compared to 768, yeah. Machine, you need to get some rest, man. You know, staying up 20 hours, that's really going to kill you. There's a floating point in math operations to introduce. Yeah, there is. But there's different floating points between a discrete graphics card and integrated graphics. So they said it will be equal to the 1660. They were saying it was going to be equal to the 1660, but I'm going to give you the caveat to this. I'm going to give you the caveat. This is something you all didn't look into, okay? Think about how many lanes you're going to have for your storage, your SSD. They reduced the number of lanes to your SSD on the smaller versions. Instead of having 4 lanes, they cut it down to 2. So that's going to slow things down a little bit for you. So you might want to think about twice before you do that. But if it's PCIe 5.0 X2, I heard they're coming out with the SSD for the PCIe 5.0 X2. But still, you're cutting off 2 lanes, so you're cutting your flow. It's like this. This straw right here. If I cut the straw in half and fold it in, it's gonna be harder to get the liquid out through from point A to point B. It's the same thing with your processor. You're going to have more bottlenecking when you take off 2 lanes than you have in 4. So this is one thing that I'm really not going to like about the 8000 series. So something I'm not going to like about the 8000 series. I can already see it now that people are going to be disappointed with it. I was kind of hoping 8,000 will be faster than the 7,700, which we will see. It might be, but it might not be. Depends on if you want the 85 or the 87. Which one? So if you get the 8700, you get the 12 CUs. So it's kind of, but the information I got about that was one of your top reviewers. They put that information out there. So how does it play games without VRAM? Machine says, well, it does. It plays with the RAM. It shares system RAM. Okay. Instead of VRAM on a dedicated VRAM for a discrete graphics card, it shares system RAM. So it isolates, you can isolate on your motherboard, you can isolate RAM just dedicated for your integrated graphics, which I get 64 gigs of RAM. And if I go to plug in iGPU, integrated graphics, I can designate the max away from that and dedicate it to just the integrated graphics. So that's all that uses the RAM is the integrated graphics. The system doesn't use it at all. See, if you go into the motherboard, you can split the two and still get better performance. That's if your system memory is at a high enough clock to support the speed that you'll need. So you'll have to have a high clock set on your memory if you're going to run integrated graphics. You don't have to, but if you want more speed and everything else, then you want to get a higher speed on your system memory for integrated graphics. It's kind of hoping. How does it play games without VRAM? Where does it store the information? It shares everything with the system RAM. So it basically goes back and forth with your system RAM to your SSD, back and forth. So some of it's shared onto your solid state drive, as using your solid state drive as a buffer. Yes, iGPU love fast system RAM. The system RAM, and this is MTBK. Yes, iGPU loves fast system RAM. The system RAM speed does matter. Yes, it does. Way less if you got a discrete GPU with its own VRAM. That is faster anyway. True and false. True, yes, for the iGPU. False for the discrete graphics card. For the simple fact, by putting more speed to your CPU, allowing your CPU to clock better with your GPU, giving you more performance. It's how you set up your system that matters to make it run faster or slower. So if you want your GPU to run faster, then if you set your CPU at a higher clock, then you can utilize those higher clocks for your GPU to run faster. Do remember, without your motherboard and without your processor and without your system RAM, your GPU doesn't work. What are you going to plug it into? Think about it. So, machine says, will the system RAM work the same as VRAM? If it's dedicated, yes, it could. This is the reason why I got 64 gigs of VRAM. This is the reason why I got 64 gigs of VRAM, was because I took a portion of it and dedicated it to the integrated graphics. Running the same, it still has the same amount of distance. I don't see why it wouldn't. The only difference is the way VRAM that's for your graphics card is built a different way than the system RAM on your computer. Okay, your system RAM on your computer is built for a different kind of storage of information compared to, compared to your the VRAM on your graphics card is built for texture manipulation and stuff like that. It's dedicated to that purpose. Your system RAM's dedicated for more than one purpose. It's dedicated to the fact of base information. So trying to buffer your virtual information into system RAM makes it a little more difficult. It's like taking and going on Windows and going in the operating system and turning up the virtual RAM that's for your system to make it run and clock faster, which you can do. So there is a big difference between the two, is because one's doing one thing dedicated for one thing and the other one's dedicated for the other. So you got to kind of figure that you're trying to store information on something that's not really dedicated for that purpose, unless your memory manufacturers put that extra process into the discrete the system memory. Then yeah, it could operate to the same speed or greater, just like a dedicated GPU. So, but they don't do that, and they haven't done that. So they did that back long time ago, if I remember right, and it didn't work out so well. So, if that's what you're wondering. Y'all have any more questions or concerns or anything else? Kind of wondering if you do. Huh. So, I've ran all these equations. I'm going to tell you guys something. I've ran all these equations through my mind. I run these equations every day through my mind. What if, what if, what if, what if? And I go looking for the answer for this what if. You know, what if it comes down to the fact of that, you know, you get bad driver set for your discrete graphics card? What are you going to do then? People don't understand. Well, you take and uninstall the old drivers, go back to the Windows factory ready display driver, and then you reinstall the old driver that you had, and that brings everything back. So that's just my pillows calling me. Machine, go to bed. Have a great night, man. We're almost done here anyway, so, go get some sleep. And we'll talk at you later, Or if you want to stay up until the end, we're almost, I got about maybe 15 minutes and I'm going to call it quits here. So that's about how long I got left. Is it still a long way to go for AMD to get RX 4070 like iGPU performance? MTBK on a laptop, you can get 50% of that performance on a laptop, but on a desktop, right now, the way they're shrinking the GPU or the processor down, and they keep shrinking it down, they're not going to have any room for the processes to do that kind of performance. They really don't. They don't have the room for that. If you look at the chiplet design on AMD, they take, and they only got 3 chiplets on there. They only got 3 chiplets that's on there. On your normal graphics graphic card die, the die itself, they only got 3 chiplets on there for your normal. But if you go to, let's say, the 7950 X3D, they got, what, 4? So they got extra room to make that extra accommodation to take and separate the integrated graphics to make it up to, let's say, a 4070 if they wanted to, but they don't. That means that they got to spend a couple extra bucks to take that same processor to increase it to make it run like that. Even if they made it, even if they took the 4070 laptop graphics and added it in there, that would be a plus compared to the minus that they're giving us. So why can't they make an iGPU that does not need a GPU and still play AAA games at 60 FPS? Well, machine, how can I say this? Your game makers are the ones that set the bill. They're the ones that set what kind of performance you get on that game and how the game is played. So without having that kind of control, they can't really build something like that on a processor without, thinking of 2 factors. One, is it going to be big enough? Are they going to have enough pins on the bottom of it to do that kind of graphic capability? Or is it going to process too much heat and cause the chip to thermal throttle at the beginning of start? That's what they got to look at, both of those factors. Is it going to pull too much power? There's another factor. How much power is that your 4070 going to pull? Let's say overall 270 watts. And in addition to the 108 watts that you got coming off of your processor, you're going to pull 300, let's say 310 watts off of that iGPU die right there in the center of your board. That's gonna put you at a heat factor of like 80C. It's gonna be about 80C. Unless you got something that can keep it really cool, that's the only way you can do it. So even if it's at 60 FPS. Older AAA games run on an iGPU at 60 FPS easily. Yes, they do. I do agree with that. Already without a DGPU. Yep. They do. Your older ones, not your newer ones, your older ones. Now, your newer ones, they struggle because they require the assistance of VRAM that comes off of your discrete graphics card. They weren't really designed, those games weren't really designed for integrated graphics. That's the reason why everybody shuns away from the integrated graphics. What about the AMD Threadrippers? They are fast, right? Yes and no. I'm going to say it like I've been hearing it for years. You could have 96 cores on your processor and only use 8 of them. Do you think it's for $5,000? Do you think it's viable to use a processor with 96 cores, which Windows only gives you 8, or just use something with like a tenth of the cost, like $230 compared to a $5,000 processor? Which one do you think is going to work better for you compared to which one's going to give you better speed? You think you're going to get better speed off of a Threadripper? Not really. Because once you overclock it, they got a fuse inside it. And once it blows, it stays at overclock speeds 24/7. So that kind of screws you out of your $5,000. That right there, you won't get a refund. Even though AMD says they might give you a refund, but I believe they won't. So, but as far as using a big processor like that for, let's say, a 4060 Ti, your CPU will bottleneck your GPU, even if it's at 16 gigs of VRAM on a discrete graphics card. So, they just make new AAA games very heavy, so they never run at MTBK. I agree with that. But also, too, you can lock your settings at 60 FPS and hope, pray to God that, you don't get any micro stuttering or anything else because the game falls short of the 60 FPS. People sometimes they lock their FPS at 60 and turn around, they fall short of the gain of it all. So basically, they'll fall down to 47 FPS, still fall short of 60, other than running it at full at about 120 to 100. Well, let's say around an average of 120 FPS. But sometimes you fall short of 60. On the lows, if you fall short of 60 on your lows, then that's a problem. So your lows should stay above 60 and your highs should stay above 120. Just as an average. So you get a 60 FPS swing. I would make the big GPUs. So yeah, I agree with that. Like Alan Wake 2 at 60 FPS. Do remember, if Alan Wake 2 is more CPU bound, then it's going to demand more CPU power and less GPU power. But if it's more GPU bound, then it's going to require more GPU power than CPU power. But with Alan Wake 2, I think it's more GPU than CPU. I'm not too sure, because I don't play that game. So I can't really, I can give you my assumption and what I see everybody else doing, but I usually see between a 35 and a 40 FPS difference between the 1% lows and the highs. So, but at 60 FPS, if your system, see now, machine, the system you got should stay at about around 60 FPS. If it doesn't, then that means you got something not set correctly. You might want to go backtrack yourself and then go through the beginning of where you're at in your BIOS and make sure your BIOS is set up correctly, and then move forward towards the rest of the units, like your now, if your VRMs are not set to where they can handle either your GPU, and get this, your VRMs are still controlled for your GPU and for your system processor, which is your CPU. If your VRMs are not up to standards, they can cause a bottleneck on your system. Like mine is set for, I have a 12 by 2. So I know I can handle, all the way up to a 5950 with no problem. Well, with your AM5 system, you should be above a 12 plus 2. Okay, machine, you shouldn't have any problem with an AM5 motherboard and the processor that you have. You should be able to keep right there with everything, including with your GPU. You all should work in harmony. You should never have a problem with it. MTBK says, there is a Linus Tech Tips video about them using an Epic. Well, that's Epic. Threadripper is different from Epic, I think. Epic's more server bound. Threadripper's like more or less like creator bound, but as far as games, I would never use an Epic for gaming. Even though that it's a powerful processor, I still wouldn't use Epic for gaming. I wouldn't. I mean, but you can use Xeon processors for gaming if you get the right one. That's the thing. There are certain ones you can game with, but you know, tips of video about them using Epic or a Threadripper CPU only to play Crysis without a GPU at all. They are not made for it, but they get faster and faster. Well, yeah. They do, but the thing is they're not made for gaming. And a lot of people have tested it. I know some people, they like using it for gaming. You know, it's not that you can't. It's just its design was more or less for a different kind of workload. That's what the way I know it. That it's designed for a different kind of workload, like a continuous workload and not sporadic workloads. Like gaming goes up and down like a yo-yo. Okay, now with the server base, now it's on a continuous field to where it runs continuous at the same all the way around every day for 24/7. So there's a big difference than running, you know, a server for 24/7 compared to running a game where it jumps up 1 minute, down the next, up next minute, and down the next. Because they weren't really designed to do that. Just to say. Unless, you know, there's a certain kind of Threadripper out there, like the one of the pro Threadrippers, then yeah, it could handle what you want. But like I said, Windows scheduling, number one, is set for, and for home users and pro users, it's still set on the theory of 8-core 16 threads. And remember, going from Windows 95 set on 1-core 1 thread to go to Windows 98 set on 2-core 4 thread, you know, and going up, and they were set basically on the cores. Every operating system's been based on the cores. So, and they've had many of these tests out there. Get this, they've had many of those tests out there with them using a 16-core 32-thread processor, and Windows shuts off half of the cores down to 8-core 16 threads. So again, it still comes down to the same thing. Windows is not set up in their scheduling, and they're never gonna to give you more than 8-core 16 threads at one time. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, Alan Wake 2 runs at 80 FPS with DLSS on and high at 1440p. Well, you get that. I mean, I've always said anything above 60 FPS, you're going to get good gameplay. I'm not saying awesome gameplay. I'm saying good gameplay, average gameplay. Above 60 FPS, you're going to get, you know, your gameplay is going to be good. So, Alan Wake 1440 highest settings, no ray tracing, 5 to 30 years depending on how big the iGPU gets. No one wants to pay $800 to do that. MTBK, I agree with you. Nobody's going to pay $800 for a GPU or a CPU that's got an iGPU on it. No one's going to pay that. Even though that it might go up to 5.1 gigahertz, nobody's going to pay $800 for that. You don't see many people with the 7950 X3D. You don't see people paying, what, $600 and some for that? Or is it probably around there? But you see how many people are paying for that. Look at Jay's 2 cents. You know what he did? He said, the hell with it. He went back to Intel. Because of the 7950 X3D was only giving him half the process. So he went back to Intel, and I think he went to a 14900 KS or K, somewhere in there. So, Damn, I was hoping for 34. Got you there. Low ray tracing, yeah. Pretty much. MTBK, I agree. Graphics cards are highly specialized while processors have to handle many different workloads and are mediocre in many ways. Yeah, they do. See, without one handling certain processes, and the other one handling the other processes, they both meet in the middle and then give you the output to your screen. So basically, one's handling the FPS and the other one's handling the textures. Like your CPU's handling your FPS because of the transaction between point A and point B. And then you got your GPU that's handling the textures and the manipulations and pushing it all to your monitor. So you got one handling one side, one handling the other, but they both meet together and give you an output. So that's just basic. DBK says, problem is 800 millimeters. Chips or a little more is the max they can manufacture, and it gets expensive because less of them fit on the wafer, which I agree. If they do not make the wafer ways bigger, no, what they need to do is make the wafer square instead of making it round. That's my opinion. I've always looked at it. If you make a wafer square, right, that means you have a set amount of room on the wafer all the way through. So that means it's like a sheet of paper, a square sheet of paper. So that means you can fit a certain amount of boxes on that paper until you fill up all the boxes. But what are you left with? No leftovers. But they decide to make it round, so they have the corners that they're wasting. That's just my opinion. If they made away bigger chips than 800 millimeters, more defects would occur. Yeah, if the chips were, but looking back years ago, didn't they, if I remember right, there were 22 nanometer processes on the processors? Was it 20? I can't remember. It's been so long ago. Don't judge me, man. Damn. Would occur maybe because of the culture of the earth, curvature of the earth. No, it's just they ain't using their common sense. The thing is they're so afraid of that spinning around and hitting a corner, they have to make it round. You telling me that you can't set your computer to actually, instead of spinning it round like a circle, make it go into a square and then turn the square like this? You're telling me, turn, turn, You're telling me that you can't do that with your wafer other than making it round and wasting? That's, like I said, it's common sense. I always thought that for years, that they were one day that they were going to make the wafers square so they can get an even amount all the way through the whole wafer. I've been thinking this for 35 years, and they've still been making them round. So, and I said this 35 years ago. And I said this to a friend of mine. When are they going to make the frickin' wafer square? And it's still like this. They're still round. They're still complaining about, waste. They wouldn't have that waste if they would have made it square. Hello. Circle is 78.5. That are of a square if diameter side length is the same. Pi, which would give you point, divided by 4 is 7.85. Okay. No matter how well you can cut a circle and tell everybody how much you can cut a pie. Okay? But you're still doing the same goddamn thing. you're still doing the same goddamn thing with waste. Is because in actuality, you can't really but get 1 or 2 wafers off of that roundness when you cut it like this into a quarter of a pie. You're only getting 1 or 2 wafers out of that, out of each corner. So you're wasting the rest of the corners. But if you take and make your wafer square, then guess what? You have an even amount all the way through of how many, squares you can get out of one big square. It's like if you get a box, how many boxes can you put inside of a big box? Are you going to put circles inside of a big box, or are you going to put squares? Like regular boxes that are square? Or are you going to put round circle boxes in there? You'll get less, and this is not a theory. You get less the amount putting round boxes in a square box than you are putting square boxes in a square box. So it's science. Yes, it's common sense. It's science. Earth is round, so wafers is... Yeah, that's pretty much it. Maybe the edges would suffer more friction when cut into slices. Actually, no. Actually, if they do this on a tray and it just spins it and goes like this and just spins it and then goes like this, actually it's less friction than to spin it in a circle. Because then, you got to spin it, break it, spin it, break it. But when you're on a square, you're doing this. You're on a pivot. 1, 2, 1, 2. On a circle, you're breaking it. You're going like this. It jerks it back. And then you make mistakes. You'll make more mistakes having a round wafer than you would a square wafer. So, just to let you know that. It's my opinion. I've had this long discussion with people in many think tanks, and they all come up with the same, they all say the same thing, that I'm saying. Yeah, a circle is round or a sphere is round. Well, how many points do you got to a circle? How many points do you got to a square? 16. Both. A sphere has more circles in it. Science. Yeah, it does. That's if you're putting a circle into a circle into a circle. It has more circumference of 1 compared to a square, which has 16. Like I said, look it up. But if you're taking a square box and you're taking little boxes that are round, you'll take up more room using those round boxes in a square box than you would taking a square box and putting square boxes inside of a square box. You'll be able to put more in the square box if they're square compared to if it's round. So basically, if it's a round wafer, you're losing more than you would having a square wafer. So no matter which way you want to cut it, I'm right. No matter which way you cut it. This is a battle I don't lose because I know I'm right. All right, everybody. It looks like, we started at 10:50 and now we're past 1 something. So we got a couple hours in. So I'll tell you what, it has been fun chatting with you all. Oh, let's see. I grabbed the microphone. So the wafers is almost pure silicon made of sand. Silica, yeah. Silica sand. Machine, everybody needs, you need at least 4 hours sleep, man. One of these days, nobody's going to bug you for 4 hours, and they're going to give you that moment. And then when you wake up, you're going to be like, oh my God, finally. I get to those moments sometimes to where if somebody wakes me up every 5 seconds, I'll be like, the next time you wake me up, I'm going to throw you out the door. Don't wake me up. So, but also too, MTBK, they're changing the process on, instead of using silica sand, I heard they're going to use something else. I forgot what they said it was, but they're gonna change the aspect of making chips to a different through a different process. That's something that's kind of got me on the concern. Well, I'm glad you have fun, MTBK. You know, I'm glad you all had fun. And yeah, you're best off, and I'm going to keep saying it, you're best off to wait till the 50 series. See what they got to offer. See what Intel has to offer. See what AMD has to offer. See what Nvidia has to offer. Weigh your differences before you decide to buy. This way, you know how you're spending your money, and you know what everything's going on. So it's all good. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen of the inner boob, and you're welcome, Machine. No problem, no problem. Gentlemen, ladies, and everybody in the boober world, if this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe. And if you watch this video today, make sure you do subscribe. And if you already subscribed, welcome to the family. And my veteran subscribers, as always, much love to you for all that you do help support the channel. Okay, MTBK, no problem. No problem at all. Guys, I am out of here. It's time to get going. I got some stuff that's cooking in real life. So, but until the next time in the next video, you know it is, and we will see you. See you. I guess what I said, see you. Thinking about the iGPU CUs. See you on the next one.